Hello and welcome to our masterclass here at the Permaculture Education Institute. I'm Morag and Erik, your host, and I'd first like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the beautiful lands of the Gubbi Gubbi, the unceded lands of the Gubbi Gubbi, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. It's a beautiful day here today, and I'm really delighted to have you here to join us on this special session. I'll introduce our guest, Erik Ohlsen, in a moment, but I first wanted to say thank you to you all for being here. There's well over 400 people who have registered to be part of this, and also many of you were able to donate when you were registering, and we have raised Australian $842 that we will be sending immediately 100% to youth permaculture landscape regeneration programs in a Tanzanian refugee settlement, which is led by one of our key partners here at the Permaculture Education Institute and Ethos Foundation, our registered permaculture charity. Just this day, 30 young people have finished their PDC, which we've helped to sponsor, and they are ready to go and get out into the community doing regeneration work. So thank you very much for that. And if you ever would like to sponsor more of this work, our donation portal is open every day. It takes somewhere around about $100 to support one young person in a refugee settlement to go through a full permaculture design course, and about $200 a month to support a perma youth leader who is out in the community helping to activate programs. So please, if you're able to donate a little bit or a lot, anytime, I'll put the link below. It's ethosfoundation.org.au, and you can just press the donate button there. So thank you very much for that. So our special guest here today at the Permaculture Education Institute's Masterclass is Erik Ohlsen. Now, Erik is a well-known American permaculture author, designer, educator, entrepreneur, mentor, and also a recent guest on my podcast, The Sense Making in a Changing World. He's recently put out this magnificent book, which is going to become, I think, the new manual for permaculture designers. It's called The Regenerative Landscaper, Design and Build Landscapes that Repair the Environment. So it takes you from the observational state through the design to the implementation, and absolutely detailed and brilliant. We have available to us because Synergetic Press, who published this book, has made available a free copy of the ebook that we are going to share with a lucky door prize winner. We also have a copy of the 2024 Permaculture Calendar with wonderful images all the way through from permaculture principles to give away as well. And I'll pick that and notify everyone in the follow-up email. And also, anyone who would like to participate in one of our either permaculture design certificate courses or permaculture educators program, which is our combined comprehensive online permaculture design certificate course, permaculture teacher certificate course, and permaculture business modules all wrapped together in one. And you can start anytime. You have lifetime access to this content and ongoing mentoring and live sessions as well. 10% off for anyone who's registered here, and I'll put the link of that into the email as well. So that's up until the end of this month. So I think with that, I don't think there's any more notices that I wanted to let you know, except to say that please feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat, and we will have time at the end of this session as well for you to ask your questions directly to Erik. So make sure that you are either typing those in the chat. We have our wonderful team here today. We have Stacey English, we have Emma Prince, we have Maya Raymond, my daughter, and we also have Monty, my 10-year-old son, who are here, who are helping to do the background tech. So thank you to all of you who are here helping, and they will be also looking out for your questions, and we'll make sure that we can get as many questions asked in this time. Thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoy this session. You may have noticed that recently we did a podcast together. So that was absolutely fantastic. And as we were chatting, we thought, we've got to do a masterclass together. This is just so great. And he's also just released this incredible book. I hope that many of you have already got it, and if you haven't, that you'll actually get it at the end of this. So This is called The Regenerative Landscaper, Design and Build Landscapes that Repair the Environment, published by Synergetic Press. And by the way, Synergetic Press has kindly offered to a door prize of one copy of an ebook that we can send to you early next week to a lucky door prize winner. And we also have another door prize, which is the 2024 Permaculture Calendar by Permaculture Principles. So that is going to be sent out to someone as well. So who is Erik? Well, Erik, many of you, I'm sure you are aware, is a long-time permaculture regenerative designer, author, educator, entrepreneur, mentor. And this book that he's written, I think is going to become the new permaculture design manual. It is a complete guide to really deepening your practice with current information. It's a guide from going from observation to design to implementation. And I am really happy to welcome you. I know that you're far from home at the moment, in the midst of a book tour, speaking to communities everywhere about your book. So welcome, Erik, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to all of you who are coming in from wherever you are to join us today. And how cool that the money that's being donated here is going to the projects that you talked about. I mean, that's a blessing, and that's really social permaculture in action, and to be able to have an economy where we can support each other. I'm just grateful to be here with you all. I'm calling in from Santa Fe, New Mexico right now, from the United States. But I live in Northern California, Sonoma County, California. So I'm currently in a high desert. There was a bit of a snow flurry here today, which was kind of shocking out of the blue. I don't live in snowy ecology. And I'm surrounded by juniper, a desert filled with juniper shrubs that are in full fruiting right now. So that's just a little grounding of where I'm coming from. And I want to kind of move, right into the material. I have a short presentation to share with you just to provide a bit of context for the conversation that we want to have. And then we want to spend most of the time taking, just having a conversation, me and Morag with you, bring your questions in and be able to get into things that you're thinking about, questions that you have, inspirations that you have, problems that we can problem solve. So I'm hoping to spend most of the time doing that. But before we do that, why don't we jump into, oops, give me a sec to get this going. Great. So what I want to start with is something that I think, Morag, did we talk about the regenerative gradient in our podcast?
No, we didn't. So let's start there. Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to just share this concept with you, because as I'm sure many of us know, the integrity of permaculture, the integrity of sustainable design, green design, regenerative design is something that we should take seriously. And there's a lot of there's a big gray area here in terms of when we are designing a project, working with clients, working with the municipality, whatever it may be, of what level of regeneration are we actually going for. And so this is the way I've been engaging people lately. And I want to share it with you because I think it's very powerful. It's a way to engage in asking questions with project stakeholders. So project stakeholders are anybody involved with the project. Maybe it's just you and your family. Maybe it's your neighborhood. Maybe you're a professional and you're working with clients and it's the clients. Neighbors are almost always some kind of project stakeholder. Maybe you're working with a school and there's an administrative board and there are teachers and there's groundskeepers that you need to speak with. So as we're defining the parameters of a project and at what level we want to bring in an ecological design, it's really helpful to understand where people are at. Because I've worked with thousands of clients over 25 years, and sometimes I just have to walk away from a project because they call me in, they want permaculture, they want a full regenerative design system. But then when I get there, what they really want is for me to kind of give them a rubber stamp on something that is inherently not ecological. So I'm just going to share this with you real quick. And it's a regenerative gradient 1 through 10. And first off, I want to say no judgment. If you do this for yourself on your own project, you will likely find that you're not a 10. I would think most projects probably aren't 10s at this point, because there are real world things that are involved, like the budget, other project stakeholders, other decision makers, the time frame that people have, the amount of energy people have to do something. So sometimes we have to start where we're at, and that might be somewhere else. So, and a little bit more context for this, where I live in Sonoma County, California, there's a certification called Sustainable Sonoma for the vineyards, and it is not sustainable at all. If you just reduce your water by a little bit, they'll give you this certificate and you get put a big sign on your vineyard, but they're still spraying literally hundreds of tons of chemicals on these every year and destroying the watershed. So I just want to make sure that when we engage in a project, we understand at what level are we reaching for it? Are we reaching for a 10, a fully functioning ecosystem benefiting all of life? I mean, hopefully, but the reality is that not everybody's ready for that just yet. So a 1 on the regenerative gradient might be stop spraying herbicides and pesticides, stop using chemicals altogether. That is a noteworthy change for people who have been doing this, for the life of their industry, the life of their business. That's a big notable change, but that's not bringing in biodiversity and other factors. A 5 might be a diverse organic farming operation. So it's no spray, it's organic, but likely the level of biodiversity is lower, and probably a tilled system. In a lot of larger organic systems are till-based systems, and that releases carbon, destroys soil microbiology. And then a 10 would be a fully functioning ecosystem benefiting all of life. Here's just a little example of how we might use this regenerative gradient. I had an experience recently with a client who we had a 25-acre project, and they said, well, we want to mow the project. I said, oh, cool, you want to mow the project. Okay. What level of ecological function do you want to achieve through your mowing? And they just look at me like blank-eyed. What are you talking about? We just want to mow. It's like, well, no, because mowing is a disturbance regime, and depending on the succession of the plant community, maybe there are natives that are just about to go to seed. You're going to mow them down before the seeds ripen. These are questions we have to ask, and why this regenerative gradient is so useful. So if we were to do a 10 on the regenerative scale, well, 1, we would probably either use a scythe or responsible grazing to mow down, a big meadow or something like that. Because then we're not using any fossil fuels. We're integral in terms of the energy inputs that are going into it. And we would do it at the right time of year. So we'd be thinking about all of the ecological successions that are taking place in this grassland or whatever this area is to mow, and starting to understand a bit about what cycles are we cutting, what cycles are we proliferating, and maybe we can't just go out and mow 25 straight acres. Maybe we need to mow patches and leave areas where native grasses are seeding, or where nesting birds are still rearing their young, things like this. So this is a bit of an example of how, when we're approaching a project, this idea of a regenerative gradient can be a tool in conversation with clients, with project stakeholders, with our partners, with our neighbors, with our school community, whoever those stakeholders are, to kind of get on the same page with what level we want. And especially, I know a lot of us here are permaculture designers and deep into that wisdom tradition. And so for many of us, we want to do the best. We're here to heal ecosystems, to heal communities. And it can be a struggle sometimes doing that as a professional or with other communities, because not everybody is there yet. So this is a great system to create a container for a conversation about how regenerative do you want to be. And if somebody says they want to be a 10, well, then things like aesthetics will come into play, because a Western garden aesthetic is almost never going to be a total ecological 10, because you're taking away habitat constantly through keeping everything overly pruned and clean. So it's these kinds of decisions that that this sort of container helps. So I just wanted to share that as a really powerful tool in your projects when working with other people. So I'm just briefly going to touch on two principles that you'll find in my book. I'm making the assumption that you're here with the Permaculture Education Institute, that the majority of folks here are aware, if not fully engaged in the application of permaculture principles, which are life-changing and ecosystem regenerating and amazing and beautiful. So we're not going to get into a big principled conversation, but there are two pattern level principles that I want to just get us on the same page with, because I think where we come from in our work, the place we come from, like our inner world, our heart, our intentions, and how that reflects the work we do in landscape, in ecosystem, in community, is really important. And I think probably the most fundamental principle that you find in nearly every indigenous and place-based culture is the principle of reciprocity. And it's time to bring this concept of reciprocity to the forefront. We find it spread out in the principles of permaculture, but I like to state it clear, like, and concise like this, because this is a principle that, again, you find in all place-based cultures, and we would find in any of our ancestral lineages. If you go back into your ancestors that lived in ecological reverence with the land, reciprocity was the center of that. So it's an ancient wisdom found in every place-based culture, and it's as relevant today as at any time in human history. And I think if we went through life and through our projects with a focus on reciprocity, how are we exchanging with each other? How are we exchanging with landscape, with soil, with water, with the living green ecosystem around us? What can we give in exchange for the yields that we receive? This can open up a really beautiful way of looking at the world, and really help you with your design process as well. And I think this principle also helps us remember that this is how we not only remember, but participate in the reality that we are nature. Because out there in ecosystems, everything is engaged in reciprocal relationships. All living things are engaged in this process. And humans are nature, we are nature, and we have an inherent responsibility for our projects, our development, and our work to operate the way nature operates, and reciprocity is at the core of that. And the last one I'll touch on here is this concept of ecological yields. In permaculture, it's named in many different ways. System yields, Bill Mollison mentioned it that way. And I like to just call out ecological yields, because I think this gives us a pattern level frame for what we are trying to do with regenerative design. And that is to enhance the ecological processes of life. And if we think of it in terms of the way humans like to think, which is yield, getting something, well, you combine reciprocity with yield and you get this. How can we generate ecological yields on every project, right? Ecological yields include human yields, because we are part of the ecosystem. So obviously food, medicine, fiber, fuel, stress relief, connection, culture. Ecosystem yields, enhancing the living soil, a healthy carbon cycle, storing and catching water, and fixing up the broken water cycle, an increase in biodiversity, and of course, helping and working together with ecosystem entities, living beings of the ecology around us, to adapt to a changing climate. So these are just some pattern level principles. Let's get into some more detailed nitty-gritty stuff, because I know there's some of you who want to talk about the nitty-gritty stuff. And I think you're going to enjoy this. For those of you, even if you're not, say, a professional, even if you're just thinking about your own garden, or you're working in some community level, this is something you'll find in my book. This is a professional, what I call it, professional design workflow. So hopefully you all can see. I can't quite see all the components here. So I'm not going to go through every last little bit. We could come back to it later in conversation if you want to. But let's just break down a few bits here, because I think this process is this has been honed. I've honed this over 25 years of doing this work professionally. And of course, we find all kinds of wonderful design processes throughout all the permaculture literature. And I've built this, I'm standing on the shoulders of the permaculture pioneers that have developed all these incredible design processes. But one thing that I found missing in a lot of our permaculture literature is a more tangible on the ground experience of the design process, not just a theoretical, assessment, vision, implementation, maintenance, and follow the cycle again back through, or the SADIMET, survey, analysis, design, monitor, install, tweak. Those are great permaculture wisdom pieces. But when you're actually engaged in a real design process, the stakeholders are vital. The people that you work with, your family, your community, your clients, and it's about how we work with people that is often the make or break for a project. I mean, I'll just say that again. It's the people factor that is usually the make or break for a project. And I've seen the most incredible projects collapse because the people part didn't work, or projects that got bulldozed after a year because the people part didn't work. So if we want to have integrity with all of our energy that we invest in these projects, so that to see them as legacy projects, as multi-generational gifts to ecology and community, then it's important that we have a really powerful process to do that. So the first site visit, I often like to drop the designer's mind when I go onto a site right at the beginning. I do not want to be designing anything the first time I walk onto a site. Drop the designer's mind and call up and embrace childlike wonder and curiosity. Take the time to just listen and observe and be in total awe of a place, whether it's a tree or a bird or a soil or the way the wind filters through a particular kind of tree, whatever it may be. Allow that sense of awe to come before you design anything, because that's going to give you really powerful knowledge about the site, about the story of place. So I often start with observational walks and sit spots, and that's a really good place to start. But just as important is developing the project context. And project context in permaculture, we like to talk a lot about site assessment. So we're looking at the sectors, and we're looking at energy flows, and we're looking at soil, water, habitat, all these things. All part of this process, super vital. But beyond the normal kind of things we talk about in permaculture, let's also bring in the personal context, your personal context. Who are you? What do you like? What kind of energy do you have? What kind of energy are you going to have in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What is your personal context? What money do you have to put into something? What skills do you have to put into something? If you're working with clients, the same thing. Assess the client. Who are they? What do they love? What energy do they have? And this is all part of building out a tapestry to understand the complete context of a site, of a project, of a situation. And as part of that, you start to ask questions like, how would I phase this project? If I start to understand the site constraints and resources, but even more the people's constraints and resources, say budget, timeline, interest, things like this, then what you can do in your design process, this is good to have at the beginning, is you might not front load an entire 7-generation design at the beginning of a project, because it might be better to take it little bit by little bit, still thinking whole systems and full connectivity, but to understand that some projects are going to take a year to design, 2 years to design, 5 years to design. This is just the reality of the world we live in and some contexts. So the more that you can engage in things when you're the more you can engage in this contextual design process, the better information you'll have before you commit to a full project. So after you have enough information, then you create your base map. So use triangulation, you could do LiDAR contours, you get your structures on there. I'm going to assume most of us know what a base map is. Then you move to develop your first concept plan. This is where I think it gets really important. And again, something that we don't often talk a lot about in the permaculture design courses and projects is how many times you're going to create a concept and throw out 50% of it or 30% of it or 25% of it and then redo it. And that second time you do it, you're going to end up throwing out 10% of it, 5% of it, and then redo it, because I wouldn't expect any of us to get the design where it needs to be on the first go. And there's actually something really empowering about that, because it means that your first design concept can be totally creative, totally out of the box, full of joy and experimentation, but also try to be realistic, because you have all this context. You lean on the context. Don't design something that's going to cost $500,000 to build if your client only has $10,000. That's not going to go over well. The project won't be a success. So base your first concept off all of this context, but just know in your heart that you're going to change things. There's going to be a revision. So you have plan version 1, you bring it to the project stakeholders, which might just be your husband or your wife or your kids, or might be a client or some other kind of stakeholder. After you get that feedback, you do your second revision. Then you get more feedback after your second revision. Usually it takes about 3 times of revising a design plan to start to get to something that is going to be buildable. And after that third design plan concept, you get final stakeholder feedback. And at that point, by the time you're presenting your third phase of your design process to stakeholders, they should know what's coming. Like, everyone should essentially be on the same page by the time you get there. And if you didn't incorporate their feedback somehow, then something was missed in the process. And incorporating feedback might also say, I thought about that and I don't think it's going to work, and here's how I've solved the problem otherwise. So it's not like when people are giving you feedback on design, you have to say, yes, of course I'm going to do that. Yes, of course I'm going to do that. No, you're the designer. You provide the quality service, but you should be addressing stakeholder feedback. And again, I'll say only one more time, that could just be your partner. That could be your project. That could be your feedback. It could just be your kids, all the way up to clients and communities. So project stakeholders is a very wide and diverse group. So once you have that final, now the last feedback, you develop the final plan. Now you have something tangible to build on. And the way we would normally do that, once we have our final plan, now we develop the installation plan. And this is almost always a phased plan. It's rarely that you're going to go install a project all in one go. So you might develop a Gantt chart. I'll show you one of those in a minute. It's a phased schedule. You'll most likely revise the budget at this point, because through this entire process, one of the things that's really magical about this is whatever somebody's budget was at the beginning is usually different by the time you get to the final plan, because people change their priorities around and new things come to light. And sometimes people are willing to invest more, or you're willing to invest more because you find something that's so priority important. We're going to prioritize this time. So you almost will always be revising your budget at this point in the process. And then you start to coordinate labor and materials. And coordinating labor and materials it's a complicated task. It's because if you want to be efficient and you want to build projects that don't go over budget, that everybody's happy with the process and people aren't, want to like tear your throat out because it's a horrible experience. When you bring people on to do the work, or when you do the work, when you bring materials on, this can really change the efficiency and flow of the installation. If I bring in all of my plants I want to plant before I've done earthworks, and now I have to spend a month keeping all these plants watered, and I don't quite have the right spot, and they're probably going to get stressed out. That wasn't good planning. I wouldn't suggest that if you're buying plants from offsite. Don't, unless you have a nursery or this is something you feel capable of. So how you coordinate and plan materials and labor is like a whole dance. It's a whole choreography to find the path that is most efficient, most affordable, and also has the least harm. Because when we build projects, and in permaculture, you know, there's the hero permaculturist that's on the bulldozer cutting the swale, or on the excavator digging the pond. You know, these are major disturbances. These are initially harmful to soil and ecosystem when you do them. Let's be real about it. And if you can organize your earthworks in such a way that you minimize the disturbance of soil, and you know, you don't retread over areas that were done because you started in the wrong place, for instance. I mean, I've seen projects waste thousands of dollars and destroy whole garden sites just to try to get the earthworks in when it could have been planned totally different. So take time to plan the phase plan, and then laying out the design on site. Always you know, how do you go from your plan to the ground? This is from, you know, you have your drawn plan and now you have to put it on the ground. Well, there's a variety of ways to do that. One thing we will always do is fence protected areas and protected trees. I don't know how many times I've seen old growth trees with what I call tractor blight, because a tractor went and smashed against the trunk on a pass. Protect those, get it all set out before machines come. Use flags, survey flags, stakes, landscape paint, you know, levels and all of that to get all your design on the ground. And know that when you get to this phase and you're laying design out on the ground, guess what? It's not going to be exactly like your final designed map, because little tweaks on the ground will be necessary, and it happens on every project. Then you build your landscape. Okay, so some of you are going to have questions about this. Write them down. We're going to get to your questions here in a minute. I'm going to share this slide deck with everybody, so everyone's going to get this. This is also in the book, but I'm going to move on to the next slide now, if that's okay. I know that was a lot. I just like fire hose you with this. Let me just show you quickly what a Gantt chart looks like. So this is another really powerful tool for planning your projects. And it's a schedule up here at the top. And you can start to lay out the components of the process by, you know, how long you think something will take. And you can start laying this out. And what's really helpful about this, and again, you'll get this in the slide deck, Morag will send it after, that what's helpful about this is managing budget, managing labor, managing materials, but having an understanding of like, when should we get the equipment on site or take it off, whatever component in the project. This is really helpful, again, for homeowners and professionals both. It's really, really helpful to have this planning tool in whatever scale project that you have, because you're more likely to be efficient with the time and energy that you have, which is sacred. You know, your money, your time, your energy, your community as energy is sacred, and you should be, you know, take responsibility for projects to ensure that they're done well. Let's just real quick, we're gonna move to Q&As in one moment. I just wanted to review a couple design projects that I've done, one recently, one a while back, just to kind of you know, wet the palate, get the juices flowing, generate some more excitement about what's possible. Here's one that we talked about in our podcast. And this is the AgriHood, 25-acre AgriHood project. For those of you who heard the podcast between me and Morag, we talked about this 25-acre farm that's in the middle of a development. So all around the outside, it's not in the map, but there's hundreds of houses being built around this entire project. This waterway swale right here that's coming in is taking all the roof water and drainage off of over 100 new houses, single family homes and townhouses. And I'm trying to talk the developer into creating a strip park in the which would be kind of off the map up here to the north, where you can have a seasonal creek where all the surface water comes off of all the buildings into the strip park, seasonal creek, a pathway along that, and it leads you down to this farm. And then after the water comes into the farm, it kind of winds its way through an olive orchard, hedgerows, vegetable beds, and then into this retention pond that can be used to irrigate the farm. A few things of note here. This is like I said, an AgriHood. So that means that this farm is designed to provide for the neighborhood, for hundreds of families that will move into the adjacent neighborhood. So they can come down here and there'll be some sort of CSA program, community shared agriculture program, so they can get their produce, they can walk and pick up their food. They can have cultural events here, weddings, bar mitzvahs, quinceañeras, whatever, birthday parties. It'll be set up as a cultural center, a community center. There's also a pathway that goes all the way around the whole 25 acres and also winds through. And that pathway can be used for exercising, you're running, bicycling, pushing kids on the strollers. There's public areas, picnic areas, so you can come out of the neighborhood and come be in the middle of the food forest in the garden. And then a whole variety of edibles, fruit tree orchards and nut orchards and vegetable production and berry production. And then a main crop area where maybe there's things like corn, grain crops and things like that. And all of this is designed to the context of the site. The site is mostly flat, very, very flat site. And in the wintertime, a big section floods. Mainly this section down here floods in the winter. And this is a number of acres. And so, of course, it's good permaculture design. Instead of trying to drain this away, we want to enhance as a wetland ecosystem. So we have a series of ephemeral pools here, native basketry garden, which is usually wetland species in that area. And then working with this seasonal drainage, which would be fully vegetated and part of a sort of wetland ecosystem. And then the entire thing, there's a big road down here. So then hedgerows, as wind breaks, there's very strong wind coming from this area. So we've got a series of windbreaks here, a hedgerow here, then the olive orchard, then another hedgerow, and then every vegetable block area has its own hedgerow for pollinators, producing more food and habitat, soil building plants, but also to protect against the strong winds in the area. And we're kind of bouncing the wind across this site. So a little bit on there, we can answer questions about that later. Last design I want to share, which was a really fun project. This is in the town where I live, the Sebastopol City Hall and Library. And we worked for 2 years with the city council, the city planner, the parks department, and a community of volunteers, master gardeners and artists. And we were tasked with coming up with an ecological garden for the city hall and the library. And this is the city hall here, and this is the library, so they're adjacent to each other. And what we've done is create what we call a narrative through time. It's a cultural history garden. So there's 4 sections. One section represents the indigenous cultural plants and gardens of the area, and the food and medicine and basketry gardens. And the second part represents sort of the pioneer immigrant areas, a very agrarian community. Bringing in a lot of things from the culture, from those cultures and the kind of foods that were grown in the area. The third area is harkens to Luther Burbank, who's from here. Luther Burbank, some of you may know, he's an internationally famous botanist from the early 1900s. And he developed things like the russet potato, the Santa Rosa plum, and other things that are, internationally known cultivars. So all this would be Luther Burbank stuff. And then the fourth one are the kind of gardens we built now, modern day permaculture, ecological gardens that have, plant guilds, nitrogen fixing plants and habitat plants. And so this was an incredible project. So now people come to the library or the city hall, they get to walk through a narrative through time, right? So this is how creative we can get. And of course, this is a whole food forest. This is a public food forest on public land. Anybody can harvest from these public food forests, but it's done in such a way where it also represents history and culture and educates folks. And here's just I don't have the planting legend, so this won't make total sense, but just to give you a sense of when you're presenting a design plan to somebody, you can just do these kind of bubble things to help represent concepts and list them out like that. That's one easy way. It doesn't cost a lot of design work and time to get a concept across, and then you can get into your more detailed planting plans. So thank you so much for being here today. Let's get into questions. If you did get my book, and you have time, leave a review for the book, whether it's like Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever. Leave a review somewhere if you're willing and feel willing to do that, because that is like the lifeblood of books these days. And if you know of people, if you're really into the book, it is comprehensive. It's 500 pages. It is designed as a manual and a referenceable book. And the hope is to get it into to develop it as a curriculum. It's a full modern day regenerative design curriculum. And so the hope is to get it into colleges and to the hands of people who need it, into permaculture programs and ecological design programs. So if you're one of those people, let's help get it out there. So thanks again, and let's get to the to the questions.
Yes, thank you, Erik. Wow, there was a lot of comments going on in the chat while you were speaking too, and one of the ones in the more recent ones around the examples that you were showing about how that is applied, particularly around the agri-hood. And that's an amazing project, an amazing concept that could quite easily be replicated across the United States and across Australian context as well. What are you noticing in your part of the world about the willingness of developers and councils to put that kind of development forward?
The ones who are really smart are really getting on board with this, because the value of an agri-hood it expands what quality of life is like. And so developers in cities and counties, as they start to understand that the ecosystem needs management and the community needs cultural connection, and if you can bring these together with good design, you have, just from a pure marketing point of view, like the developers, who are a part of this project, they are going to sell every single one of those homes, and there's going to be a waiting list, and they're going to sell them quickly, because they're not just selling a home, they're selling a lifestyle. They're selling a zero net energy, ecological farm integrated water harvesting lifestyle, where there's closed loop systems right in your entire neighborhood. So this is a good angle to bring to developers and city councils and stuff. This is the angle to bring, because of course money is the thing that talks with those people. And
what I'm gathering from this too, from the examples that you've shared, they're very public examples, they're big examples. This is the possibility for permaculture designers to become really professional and really successful in the work. And so, your design company is not just doing backyards, you're doing massive projects like this. And so can you just maybe speak, and then we'll start getting people popping your hands up if you'd like to. There's that little feature down the bottom where you can raise your hand like that, and we'll pop you up to the top corner. So just while we're having this little chat, get yourself ready for doing that. What is your advice for people wanting to take their permaculture design consultancy to the next level, to really make this substantial contribution to society at the same time as generating a livelihood and taking it out of where it might be now into this scale, I suppose?
Yeah, well, so the first thing I would say is, if you're someone who has projects, you're currently working on projects, then I'd say one of the most powerful things that I've ever did was I created a demonstration landscape garden farm, whatever you want to call it. So being able to invite people into a space that represents what's possible, like you have, like I have, this is probably one of the most powerful things. I've had city council members, I've had congressional representatives that are representing my district at the top level of federal US government hang out in my garden, talk about growing food, taste a fresh peach off the tree. This is powerful for people, because people don't know what they don't know, and to bring them into a full-fledged ecosystem landscape like the kind we're talking about here, it literally changes people's lives. It totally, just that experience will change somebody's life. And so if you can do that, but then really host it in a professional way, invite professionals to it, make it free. If you have, say, like a wood fire, a cob oven, cook pizzas, really show off all the capabilities. And then talk up things like how much carbon is being sequestered in this garden, how much water is being captured, how much food is being produced. Have those metrics at the onset, because people need numbers, and they like professional people need numbers to understand what the potential. So that's one piece. The other thing I would say is and I think something we talked about on our podcast a bit, that's balance between volunteerism and professionalism. We really got into that conversation before, but building relationship in the community is the backbone of getting these kinds of bigger projects. It's unfortunately, we 100% live in a culture of who you know. If they don't know you, they're not going to hire you. You're not going to have any impact on them. So what do you have to do? That you have to go to a city council meeting, speak at public comment time, share some exciting ideas, talk with a city council planner afterwards, or go to the opening of a new development where the developers are there, and see if you can engage in conversation. How do you build relationships with people who are making decisions, who have the power to operate at this scale? And that requires going out in the community and building those relationships and making connections. And those connections might come from your kid's school, because the local planner down the road's kid goes to school with you, and maybe you do a volunteer project in the garden and you get them out there at a school garden volunteer day, and you start to build a relationship that way. So I like to say there's these different circles of community, and within all these different circles of community, it might be a yoga community, it might be a sports community, a football team, it could be dog walkers at the dog park. These are all little circles of community. And if you can go out and get to know people and start to engage and inspire them and invite them over to your place, this is how you gain that social capital. For me, it's really about social capital. And that's how these things happen. And as you start to build enough social capital in the community, then people say, someone says, oh, I really want to I want to bring regenerative design to my house building project. And they say, oh, talk to Erik. He's the one, he's your guy, because they like you, because they built a relationship. It's not always about the work you do. And I think that's a problem. It's definitely a problem, but some people can do incredible work, but are total assholes. Nobody wants to work with them. And
teams are good in that regard, then, aren't they?
What's that?
Teams are really good in that regard. You have the people person, and you have the the design nerd.
Yeah. So those are some things I could keep riffing, but
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And this idea of just that moment, that very simple moment of connection, the aha moment, then shifts all other sort of decisions and relationships that happen from that point onwards. So if you can touch the heart of someone and shift some kind of concepts, new doors open and new possibilities emerge. And so I was going to ask you, but I think you answered, it's about, you had federal politicians in your garden. Was that by, how did you reach out to them? Did you invite them in? Was that just they happened to be part of the local yoga club? Or how did you get to that? Where was that connection?
So that was because I work with an organization called ERIK'S, which, if folks don't know about this organization, they're an unbelievably inspiring nonprofit in California that gets municipal contracts and government contracts to do things like gray water, rainwater harvesting, forest gardens, and things like that. So I worked with them from the onset and did a lot of designs for their volunteer projects and led a lot of weekend workshops with them. And because they're operating at a level where they're looking at how to get state and federal funding that's coming down to protect watersheds, to protect there's all kinds of issues, especially here in California, and every one of our provinces or counties are going to have various issues. And at a certain point, hopefully, the powers that be want to throw some money to solve some problems. Daily Acts is an organization that's there to help solve problems. So at a certain point, because of all the social capital I built with them and the relationship I built with them, the founder Trathan said, "Hey, why don't we bring? Do you want to? We're hosting some of our government decision makers for a garden tour. Would you like to be on that garden tour?" Yeah, of course. Let's bring them in. And so we got to give them a tour. And and for people who are operating at that level, who are federal, congressional representatives or even state representatives, it's really nice for them to visit projects that feel good, that are solution oriented, and to have a day where they can be with their constituency and feel a bit of hope and like, oh, these are people I want to invest in because look at what they can do.
Yeah, actually, we've just sponsored one of the previous projects in Uganda was with Fred. I don't know if he's here at the moment, who runs the Peace Foundation, which is Permaculture Education Community Action. I can't remember the exact acronym, but he brought together all the local authorities and took them through a walk through his demonstration garden. And then they went away and talked. And then he said the next day they came back and they said, "We've made a decree that there will be no more chemical agriculture in this area. It's all going to have to be regenerative agriculture." And he did that by, and so anyone who's here who'd like to support more of that kind of projects, we can definitely do with some support to get that happening. So it's so
Amazing.
Powerful, absolutely powerful. Look,
Yes.
I really want to make sure we go to some questions. I haven't actually spotted any questions in the chat. I wonder whether Maya or Stacey or Emma, if you want to open your mic, if you can see a question, or if someone wants to pop their hand up and ask, come and join us on the chat and ask Erik directly, we'd love that.
There was a comment from Judith just asking where the agri-hood was located, the design for the agri-hood that you showed.
Yes, so that's located in Sonoma County, California, in the city of Rohnert Park. And if you look up Somo Village, SOMO Village, Sonoma County, you just look that up, and you can find the project. And the farm is called Headwaters Farm, and I think they have a page there. It hasn't been built yet. We've been in the design and planning phase, and it probably won't be installed for at least another year because they're doing a tiger salamander, or an endangered salamander in this region. And there's a study happening on the farm right now to see if there are tiger salamander in the area, which would adjust some of the development and farm projects. So once that's done, then yeah, so Somo Village.
Yeah, yep. Thank you. There was a question too in there about whether there's any animals designed into the agri-hood from Jared.
Great question. Remember when I said about stakeholders and where we are on the regenerative gradient? This is one of those factors where I was really pushing to integrate animals into the ecosystem, and the owner of the top decision maker said, "Nah, I don't want animals." So we're still working. They had a design charrette with the community, and a number of people brought up suggested having animals in the design, so maybe they'll come around. But at this point, I would say that project is operating at like a 6 in my regenerative gradient. I'd say it's like maybe a 6.
Yeah. Thanks, Erik. Trish, we'll go across to you. Maya, would you? Yeah, thank you. Hi, Trish. Welcome.
Hello, Morag. Hi, Erik. Thank you so much for a great presentation. Erik, I'm operating with my husband at just a personal level on 2.5 acres in Australia. We're both in our 60s now. We have great idealistic dreams. We have the plan. It looks beautiful on paper. I'd love you to talk, if you could, about maintaining motivation during some significant setbacks, managing family, dependence, and having to put food on the table, and so wanting to do the very best. How does one keep the motivation going and not get tempted to take shortcuts?
Thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. And my answer is phasing the plan. Having a phased plan is going to help a lot. not feeling like you have to go do everything at one time, taking the time to, I showed that Gantt chart. You don't have to use the Gantt chart. Not everybody's a spreadsheet nerd. I'm not one actually at all, but people I work with are. Anyways, coming up with a phase plan so that when you go implement a part of the plan, it's not overly intimidating to you. Get some wins, do something small that you can achieve and enjoy that. And if you have more energy, do more. So that's one approach to that. I will also say that once you build the system, so some people, okay, let's just get it done. I've got some money and energy. I just want to get it done. And then there's the fear of how to manage it and maintain it. Well, I will say that part of maintenance is about a cultural aesthetic. And if you came to my garden, I raise kids, I run a business, I'm coaching my son's soccer team. It's like, I don't have a lot of time to manage my garden at all, but I've set up the system, so it's there. And if I don't do anything for a month, doesn't matter. It's totally fun. It's totally happening. It doesn't look amazing. It doesn't look like the most clean, pristine thing, but I don't worry about it. If I don't get around to harvesting every apple, I'll let the apples fall and let other organisms eat them. Sometimes you have to let go in order for the abundance to be achieved and not try to control everything too much. But in terms of getting it done, if you're in analysis paralysis, then just start somewhere. Start on something small, get it done, and enjoy it. And then there's also ways to do things bigger, broad brush. For instance, one thing I love to do at the right time of year when the rains are going to come is sow seeds, just seeds, not doing anything else. Maybe I have to prep the area a little bit, but then just broadcast seeding edibles, medicinals, insectary plants, nitrogen fixers, and allow that require very little maintenance, allow it to grow with the rains, and then enjoy the harvest, and maybe you scythe it back later. So there's ways to do things that don't require a lot of energy, but you get a lot of return for that energy. Work with youth. Obviously, if you can. I know it's almost cliche to say, but I mean, I got to work some trades out with my son, but I get him moving mountains of mulch and compost as often as possible. So I know it's an amorphous response to your question, but
it's a wonderfully rich response, I think, because there's so many different aspects, and there's also lots of little comments coming through for you too, Trish, in the chat. So that's really, it's a big thing, because people do have quite large pieces of land sometimes, and the overwhelm can become quite enormous. So maybe that integration of animals, letting spaces rewild, tending to the bits that you can, and having that pulse in and out with the seasons of your own life. I do the same as you. In some months where I'm just so full of everything else that the garden just looks after itself, and then we come in and we tidy up around it. But I do also like the idea of inviting youth, and also young volunteers who can learn in the process as well. Yeah. Look, we're running out of time, and I can see that Alan's got his hand up there, and there was also a couple of little questions too that I wanted to come back to as well. So over to you, Alan.
Great. Hi, Morag and Erik. Really appreciate this. And mine is kind of a follow-on question to Trish's. I live in Berkeley, California, and we had the asphalt pulled up and then traffic circles put in. So I've got this about 30-foot diameter circle that I'm working with. And in June, we put in native plants. It's meant to be for native pollinator plants. And so that was broadcasting of seeds and the plants, potted plants put in. The thing is that the underlying soil is is mostly clay that's been compressed from the construction work. And my question is about trying to get that prepared, and then the use of earthworms and night crawlers in order to get the below ground habitat back in order.
Gotcha. Are you able to, is it in a position where you can bring any equipment onto the site still?
We could bring, it's only 30 foot in diameter. So
yeah,
it's not like, yes, I guess we could bring something in, but I think it would still be like some kind of hand tiller or something.
yeah. Why I bring that up is because sometimes in situations like this, I'll get a mini excavator, and I'll do it. Something I write about in my book is I'll do a decompaction, a non-inversion decompaction. So you put the bucket in, and you just kind of put the bucket in and kind of lift a little bit, take it out, go 6 inches next to it, take it out, put it in, take it out, put it in, take it out, and you can just kind of chop it up, almost like you're chopping up, a salad or something. Chop it up. And I see comments like broad fork and stuff. But if it's the compacted clay that you're talking about, that probably was, steamrolled on with a big road machine, probably you'll need more like an excavator and chop it like that. And then, yeah, the excavator broad fork, and then you loosen everything. Then you do your layers, then we're going vertical layers. So bringing in 2, 3, 4 inches of compost, cardboard, wood chips. So that way we bring all the organic matter into it, activate the biology, spray compost teas and things like that. So you get a lot of biology, plant with mycorrhizal fungi. And now you're going to create an ecosystem that can thrive there. Otherwise, if it's a big compacted clay hard pan, it will struggle if you can't loosen that up. So I see someone saying yeoman plow. That would be hard to maneuver in a situation like that. So I think a mini excavator for a 30-foot diameter circle, and you can just boom, boom, boom. So that's one idea. Otherwise, if you can't do that, then I would say do try to broad fork with a hand broad fork after it's rained. Wait till it rains and everything softens. Then you can broad fork it that way, and then run compost, cardboard, wood chip mulch or leaf mulch, whatever you can, and really get that.
Yeah, add and keep adding.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Erik, and thank you for your question, Alan. Look, we've come to the end of the time. There are a couple of extra questions in here. Maybe just as a very quick response, I don't know, Yul from South Korea. Hi, Yul. Lovely to see you here. She asked, what is your approach for restoring ecosystems with the least harm? Because I think that's in response to what you're talking before about you can go in and you can do these big interventions and then restore it. But what about if you don't do that?
I love this question. And one of the principles that I have in my book, again, we have permaculture principles, and then we have what are some pattern level values that we approach. And one of mine is do the least harm. And I think that this lens is very powerful. And what I would say to you is, first and foremost, what have and currently do Indigenous folks, how do they approach stewardship in that ecosystem? That's the first question I would ask, because whether it's bringing in fire or some other kind of disturbance regime, which activates a successional process of regeneration, that could be a component. A component could be just planting by seed, not any disturbance at all, just seed planting at the right time of year, the right correct species. That's a component. Moving animals through in a short duration, high intensity could be a way to achieve that. But I love this. Do the least harm. When I was in my 20s, and I took my first permaculture course when I was 19, and in my 20s I was just like, swale the world, we're gonna swale. Every single project has to have 24 swales and ponds, and and you're just ripping up and tearing up the whole ecosystems, and there may not even be enough water to fill half of those swales. And it's like, well, so I really now at this phase in life and in my practice, I really first and foremost look at what not to do, look at honoring existing ecosystem function. How can I nourish existing ecosystem function? For instance, in California, we live in a food forest ecosystem. It's called an oak woodland. For over 10,000 years, Native people were sustained by acorns, and the majority of people don't know how to eat acorns anymore. So also understanding, again, what are the indigenous practices of that area and the cultural practices, and then when appropriate, mimicking them, and maybe allowing for understanding that your harvest might be different than what you would think. Rather than planting an orchard of apples, you're managing a woodland of oaks, and you're doing that in a way that is full of integrity. So
yeah, it's become a really important part in the start of all of our permaculture design courses now too, like really paying attention to that and finding a way to be in conversation as well. And I think it's absolutely essential. And thank you for saying. I realize that we have come to the top of the hour, and we probably should wrap it up. There is so much to keep talking about. The questions actually start coming in once you start trying to wrap up. So I'm really sorry to those people who haven't had a chance. But have a look at the regenerative landscape. You can get it in its full glory in its 500 pages as a hard copy, but you can also get it as an ebook if you wanted to as well. And I highly recommend that you get this, you share it, and like Erik said, leave a review, because that's the way that books get out these days, by getting on there and saying, how much you love this book. It really does. And Christmas is coming up. I don't know, maybe it's a gift you could give to people as well. Thank you so much for jumping on, Erik, in the midst of your book tour away from home, to come in and share with us your approach. And I really love the gentleness of the approach. Like his broad scale thing, it's big picture thing, but at the same time it has a gentle heart of that, the generosity of the reciprocity, and the timeline, like taking your time, being in practice, connecting, and really, noticing from that childlike awe as the way that you enter into a space. I just think it's been a beautiful sharing of a design flow that is very professional and life-changing, and contribution to where we need to be going in the world these days. So thank you so much for being here. Really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And thank you everyone for being here and for dropping in all your questions and comments. We will draw the prize and let you know. We'll also send you out the link to Erik's book in the chat. And if you've got any other questions you'd really love to ask Erik and we've missed them, I'm sure if I gather them up and send them to, he might be gracious enough to respond as well. Yeah,
some of them at least. Thank you all so much. Thanks for having me tonight, this morning, or wherever it is, wherever you are. It's been a joy to be in community with you today and to discuss how we can heal our world and our community together. And everyone who shows up, I feel like you're a part of that. And so thank you for all the love you give to your own community, your own families, your own landscapes. And I'm so happy to be in this together with you.
Thanks, Erik. Take care. Take care, everyone. See you again next time. Bye.